Hi, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of Digital Literacy Week. I'm Mallory Dawson. I'm the Community Engagement Librarian at Whitby Public Library. And you are joining us today with this great presentation by the Region of Durham, Lock Up Your Privacy by Access and the Privacy Office. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. So may we respectfully honor the knowledge and understanding of the Indigenous stewards of these ancestral lands and ensure that the voices of the First Nations peoples are represented in our collections, programs, and services. So today I have with me 3 people. I have Elizabeth Scott, who is the Corporate Privacy Officer, Manusha Cyrilla Kamaran, who is the Privacy Analyst, and also Robin Bonneau, the Privacy Analyst as well at the Region of Durham. So I will pass things over now to Elizabeth, and she'll lead this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mallory, for inviting us to share in Whitby Library's digital literacy event. As mentioned, I'm Elizabeth, the Corporate Privacy Officer here, along with Privacy Analyst Manusha and Robin from the Region of Durham's Access and Privacy Office. We're excited to be here as this is a great opportunity for us to connect with our community on the importance of protecting private information, which affects each and every one of us. Our goal today is to provide some reassurance that there are things we can do to protect ourselves when it comes to our digital privacy. It's just top of mind right now to maintain proper protection to safeguard our health, like washing our hands and social distancing. We're hoping to raise awareness of the idea of keeping up to date with our privacy hygiene, meaning we can build into our daily routines ways to keep private information secure. We'll be sharing our knowledge with you through a panelist approach, and I will serve as our moderator for Manusha and Robin, our panelists, who will provide you with some great tips to commonly asked questions as we navigate this technological shift. So let's get started. Manusha and Robin, many of us have moved to a teleworking model, working from our home offices. There seems to be a perceived measure of safety and security when working on-site with an employer, as they're responsible for taking care of those behind-the-scene features like secured internet and malware protection. However, if we're working from home, is it safe to assume we're still protected the same way we would be if we're no longer on site?
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Liz. So I think a good place to start off with is just kind of getting an understanding of what teleworking is. A lot of people call it a lot of different things, such as telecommuting, working from home, remote working, but they're basically all the same thing. It's a work arrangement in which employees do not have to commute or travel to a central place of work, such as an office building or a warehouse. So, since we are working from home or teleworking, we're not really afforded the same protective measures as we would in our workplace. Yes, working from home does allow us to live and work in this very flexible situation, but it requires an active engagement and participation from everyone that's involved. Especially right now in our current situation, everyone's taking work home with them and they're potentially risking people at home, using your Microsoft Teams, answering calls with family members around. So it's just important to be aware. With teleworking and weakened securities, more effort needs to be made to help protect yourself, your family, your friends, your clients, your customers, and if you're the employer yourself, your staff and business.
So just to add to what Manusha is saying, I think working remotely offers awesome benefits. It's super flexible. However, with that said, there's also some risks that come along with that we need to be aware of. So there is a lot more responsibility on you when you're working remotely to still maintain that same level of privacy and security that you would get working in the office. So how do we go about kind of maintaining our privacy at home or remotely? Well, we recommend having a secure physical and digital environment to work in. When we're talking about physical environment, we're really focusing on having a designated place to work, whether it's at your home or elsewhere. Although for some, this may not be possible, but the reason why we strongly recommend this is because oftentimes we're looking at things that are sensitive on our screen, or we're having conversations where we're talking about someone else's personal information. So it's really important that no one else around us or in our household can see our screen or hear those conversations. Similar when we are traveling to and from the office, because I know many of us can be rotating shifts, working remotely as well as in the office. You want to be mindful that you're protecting those devices and that work information that you're bringing from the office to your remote location. It's not unheard of that people break into vehicles or steal items in public transportation. So it's very important that you secure your devices at the utmost important because they contain so many sensitive files that may surprise you. We're looking at over thousands. So going back to what I said earlier, we also want to focus on having a secure digital environment. And what this really means is working on a secure network, which is a Wi-Fi, because that's how we conduct most of our work when we are remote. And for many of us, we're at home. So this means our home Wi-Fi. And a few things that I just want to raise to your attention to offer you better protection for your privacy at home is to be mindful of all the smart home technology that you connect to your home Wi-Fi. And the reason we are suggesting this is because the more devices you have connected, so things, let's say like your thermostat, doorbell, smart fridges nowadays, the more you're opening up to threats in the event that one of those devices get compromised, it could actually compromise your entire network, so your whole home Wi-Fi network, as well as all the devices that are on that network. So for that reason, you do want to minimize the amount of devices you're connecting. And as solutions, we recommend that you always keep all of your devices software up to date. The reason being is because oftentimes these developers will push out these updates because there's security flaws in those devices. It's not always to push out really cool new features, even though that could be the case sometimes. It's really just to offer you more privacy, more security with that device. So always make sure that you're updating your software and turning on your automatic updates if that's available to you. Another option available is to have two separate networks. So one where only your work devices and your personal devices, so those kind of items that contain a lot more personal information, are on one network. And then on your second network, you can have all your other lingering devices for your home, like we mentioned, like a smart fridge and so forth. That way, if there is, one of your devices being compromised, it's not going to affect every single device or put it at risk. And lastly, I want to recommend that as we move forward in this digital age, you're going to be finding that a lot of devices can now be connected to the internet. And despite the fact that they have that capability, you should really ask yourself, does this need to be connected? What are the benefits versus the risk? Just because it's really important to always protect your network, as I stated before, because all your devices are oftentimes connected to it.
Exactly, Robin. I was just thinking the same thing with the connection of all these various devices and objects to your internet. It reminds me of things such as like OK Google, Alexa, Siri. They're always listening and changing their preferences to what is being said. These platforms are collecting data, and that leads to then sharing of that data and then tracking of it. This can be a potential vulnerability to your system and your Wi-Fi. I think a good way to look at this is if you have a house and your house has multiple doors and windows. So there's just many points of potential access into your home. It may be convenient to have all these windows because it allows sunlight in, but at the same time, having multiple devices connected to your Wi-Fi, even though it may be convenient, presents the possibility to have more vulnerabilities. And speaking of Wi-Fi, I think a big thing that comes up nowadays is your home Wi-Fi. Always make sure that your home Wi-Fi network is secure and password protected. Your home Wi-Fi is the gateway to all your connected devices. Your password is the first line of defense to protect and minimize threats to your home network. So, a big thing that when you first get your Wi-Fi, it usually comes with a default password. So, going back to this house analogy, when you buy your house, you're obviously going to buy this house, but make sure you change the locks when you get it. If you don't do that, the previous owner or anyone they gave a key to will have access into your home, and you don't want that. Also, most of the time, these default passwords are pretty standard, so cybercriminals, hackers, they usually know what it is. Something along the lines of welcome one or password, and it's usually pretty common. The other thing that you have to do is create a strong and unique password. If you don't have a password, anyone can access your network, take control of it, put a password on it, and then kick you out as well. So having access to your home Wi-Fi results in a hacker having access to all your devices, just like Robin said.
And on the conversation of passwords, I think this leads into another good topic. Oftentimes you'll hear have unique passwords for all your accounts. And me, prior to kind of doing my own research, I didn't really know why that was. And as a result, I just continued to use the same passwords because it was easy. But the reason why you would never want to do that is because if one of your accounts ever gets hacked into or compromised, and that password is now available to somebody, they will, let's say a hacker, oftentimes use that same password to go into any other account that they know you have. And this is because hackers are very familiar with the fact that many of us do reuse the same password. As I mentioned earlier, it's just easy to remember. However, the risks are very large in the event that, again, one of your accounts were to get compromised and your password in the wrong hands. And to further kind of this conversation about passwords, we also hear, create strong passwords. So a good recommendation that we can give to create strong passwords is to do something called a passphrase. And that's when you take a sentence, maybe it's a memorable quote or lyric, something that sticks out to you, and you use the first letter of each word. So your end product of that password is really just going to look like a messy bunch of words letters that don't look like it's an actual word. So these passwords are a lot harder for anyone to hack into, and it's easy for you to remember because, again, it's, as I said, some sort of sentence that sticks out to you and you remember. With that said, we also recommend that you have between 8 to 12 characters in your password. And the the more characters you have, the better and stronger your password will be. And in addition, I wanted to introduce, in the event that you guys are not familiar with it, something called a password manager, because a lot of services are now being offered online, and you're likely to have created more and more accounts having to then create new passwords, which can be a difficult task, especially when we're encouraging you to do these unique passwords. So a password manager basically saves all of those passwords for you. Lots of phones nowadays actually have them built into their device, or you can get apps that are both free or some that cost money. And again, it will save your passwords. That way, when you're on the site or you're accessing an app, it auto populates for you. That way you don't need to remember it all. And it's a secure way to kind of lock down all those passwords for you.
That's great. Thanks, Robin. And we've talked about home Wi-Fi, but what are your thoughts when it comes to using public Wi-Fi, say in a coffee shop or a public library? Are there concerns that we should be aware of when connecting to a public Wi-Fi network?
Thanks, Liz. Oh, absolutely. Using a public Wi-Fi can be very convenient, and oftentimes it's free. But I think it's important to note that even when you log into these public Wi-Fis, you start to expose yourself to a lot of risks because you don't know who else is connected to it. So there's a couple of common public Wi-Fi tips and tricks that hackers will use, such as the evil twin attack. So this is essentially a fake public Wi-Fi. An example of this would be if Starbucks Wi-Fi is the name of the actual Wi-Fi at the coffee store, but then at the same time, the hacker were to make a separate Wi-Fi that's called Starbucks free Wi-Fi. So essentially, they set up a Wi-Fi which is identical or similar in name to the legitimate one. Another very common attack is one where once you're connected to the public Wi-Fi, it's a form of eavesdropping. And this is actually the most popular because it's easy and lucrative. Essentially, what the hacker would do is put themselves between you and the public Wi Fi router. While in this position, they can interpret, read, and alter the information you send and receive from the Wi-Fi router. So an example of this is if you're sitting in Starbucks and you're already logged on to their legitimate public Wi-Fi, and then the hacker comes in the middle and you look for Gmail. You look at the website and you think it's the legitimate real website. So you put in your credentials, you put in your login, you put in your password, and you hit enter. But by hitting enter, you've actually exposed your information and you've compromised your account. Some of these hackers are actually so clever these days that they'll redirect you back to the real Gmail site so that when you go and you put your password in again, you have no clue what's happened and you're kind of oblivious to it all. So this can then lead to having your personal information being compromised, identity theft, and just a whole slew of other issues as well. So I would suggest, and we would suggest, that you should just avoid public Wi-Fi as a whole, if possible, obviously. Try and use your own mobile or hotspot data. And then another big thing now is called VPN, which is known as a virtual private network. The VPN connection establishes a secure connection between you and the internet. So all your data is routed through an encrypted virtual tunnel, which disguises your IP address. And everyone has their own individual IP address for any Wi-Fi or smart device. So many workplaces provide VPN to their employees to access their work drives because it protects everything you send and you receive to and from this device. But VPN isn't just for when you're in the office. It actually can be used on your home Wi-Fi and should be used there as well.
Thanks, Manisha. I love the idea that everyone has to take active responsibility. Privacy is not a passive concept. And while employers will do everything that they can to keep informed and secure with our information, we do have our own part to play, especially when it comes to working from home. So besides the shift to teleworking, the online retail market is a particular industry that has gained remarkable traction amidst the stay-at-home orders. And for those of us who are hesitant in moving in this direction, or some have some concerns about the security of personal information, like our credit card details and mailing address, are there steps we can take to further protect our information when online shopping?
So as we've already said, use a secure network. So that means not using a public Wi-Fi. And if you do, make sure you're on VPN. So don't use the public Wi-Fi and when you're making these online purchases. As we already explained, cyber criminals can intercept the information you send, which can include something like your credit card number if you're shopping. The other thing to do is use reputable and trusted websites. So make sure you're checking the URLs. Make sure that this is a trusted site that you're familiar with. And if it's not familiar, make sure that you know or look into this website. Sometimes they like to pose a lot of these really, really good deals, and you think you're gonna get an amazing deal and save some money, but at the same time, it's probably just a fake account. It's just too unbelievable. Um, so once again, just make sure you look at the URL bar and make sure that you are aware that there's no spelling mistakes and that this is a website with the correct domain. So for example, the difference between a .com or a .ca or a .net. An example would be, I know I do this all the time, which is terrible. When I'm going on to Google, sometimes I write goggle. It just happens, but just make sure you know what the website you're using. So the other thing that you can look out for is the difference between an HTTP website and an HTTPS website. So look out for the little lock key icon in your URL, especially when you're shopping online, and make sure that these websites are more secure when there is an S at the end of these websites. So any legitimate shopping site should have that S there. Another thing is cookies. Cookies are designed for websites to remember information or to record the user's browsing activity. They can also be used to remember pieces of information that the user has previously entered into the field, such as your name, your address, passwords, and your credit card numbers. And they make it super easy to use these online retail platforms. But it's essential in these modern web days to know what is being done when you use these cookies. So this information is being saved on your computer. So make sure that you delete this information and erase the information that is saved on your browser. So that is your account passwords, your website preferences. Make sure you delete all of that. It is helpful when you're sharing your computer or device with other people and you don't want them to see your browsing history. Another way to bypass this is using incognito mode. So if you go on your web browser, there is a special feature that you can go and click, which more safely secures the location of your computer. Another big thing is just don't share and overshare, sorry, and don't save your information at the checkout. See, recommend providing as little information as possible when you're making these online purchases. And unfortunately, a lot of these common big retail websites are places that a lot of us go. And that also means hackers. They go to these websites as well. So they're more likely to be breached. So if that's the case, the less information you have out there that is yours on their websites, the less likely you'll be affected by this breach when these retailers get breached.
Very comprehensive. Thanks, Manisha. Cybercrime is certainly more prevalent now. Cyber-related fraud has increased by more than a third from 2019 to 2020. And with all this digital information being housed by organizations around the world and in every industry, what do we really need to know about privacy breaches and how to protect ourselves?
Yeah, I think this is a really relevant question because we are unfortunately hearing about more of these breaches happening and sometimes affecting our own information, which can be a little bit scary. So as of lately, we do hear about cyber attacks causing these breaches. And what typically happens is that these groups or somebody in particular hacks into an organization to steal information. That's what causes a breach. And oftentimes they will do this because it's financially motivated. So they'll either sell it on the dark web or they will try and sell it back to that organization that they breach for money. So the effects of a data breach can unfortunately be very detrimental, depending on the information that's compromised, and can last many years in terms of effects. A common effect that you may hear of as a result of a data breach is identity theft. And that's when someone has your information and they try and impersonate you to, let's say, open up loans or accounts under your name or even to commit crimes. So again, the effects can be detrimental, but there are ways that you can protect your privacy that I believe Manusha will touch on now.
So yeah, you just have to be very, very careful. Once this information is out there, there's pretty much no getting it back. So how do you protect yourself from a breach? It's all about being proactive. So some things that you can look out for are pay attention to your bills and statements. Actually take time to review them and actually consider getting a separate credit card that you're dedicating to online purchases, just so you know what you're looking for. And make sure you have different passwords for all of these different cards, like we said earlier about passwords. Another thing is when you have personal records or financial statements that you don't need anymore, make sure you shred them. Another thing nowadays is protect your mail in general. Guard your mailbox from theft and add a lock to it. Nowadays, especially, there's been a lot of scams that have been taking place where packages are getting stolen just right off your doorstep. Another thing is spring cleaning. Clean out your email accounts, delete old emails if you don't need them. In that way, if your account does get compromised, a hacker or a cyber criminal has access to less information. Another thing is MFA, multi-factor authentication. I know here at the region of Durham, as employees, when we log into our devices, we are asked to then put our original login, and then there is an additional step where we are, for example, sent a text message where we have to give a separate password. Multi-factor authentication is more than 2 steps of authentication. Another thing is with phishing attacks. So if an email looks a little fishy, there's some sense of urgency, don't click on it. Usually what these attacks are meant to do is where a hacker sends out multiple emails to multiple individuals, just trying to bait someone on that hook. So if you get an email or something like that, call your IT department or call your HR. Or better yet, if this is something like Amazon that's sending you an email and telling you to take an urgent action, don't call or click a link on the actual email itself. Go and find the number or email address from actual Amazon so you know you're contacting the right person for this information. Another thing is keep your devices and software up to date. Have the latest security updates and patches, and consider getting some really good antivirus software. So another thing is, if you're ever curious and you want to know what some of the most popular and current scams are, you can go and check out the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, and it has them all listed out. It's just a good resource for you to take a look at and learn from these experiences that are posted.
Another great resource that you could use is a website called Have I Been Pwned? It's a little bit strange sounding, but it's a really good tool if you want to search your phone number or email address to see if it was ever affected in a breach. So if you're kind of playing catch up and you want to, look over your privacy and if any of your information was ever involved in a breach, using that website is just a really great resource to educate yourself further on any kind of breaches that may have affected you in the past. So leading on to another kind of conversation now, what do we do in the event that our information may have been compromised, so may have been part of a data breach? So our office recommends first and foremost to actually educate yourself on that breach and to find out as much information as you can, only so you could determine what type of information was actually involved in the breach, because you'll want to focus on protecting that information or changing it if it's possible. When you are affected by a breach, the organization that had the breach will usually notify you. So hopefully you will hear about it. However, if there's thousands of people that were affected, sometimes you don't always get that direct notification, and the organization could use their social media platforms or their website to provide that notice. So just be mindful of the different avenues that you could get to notify you of a breach that may have affected your information. So as I mentioned, depending on the type of information, you want to protect and change it. So if it's something like your account, change your password right away and even your account username if that's possible. If it's your email address, consider getting a brand new email address and so forth. So if it's more information, let's say that's financial or it's your SIN or driver's license number. So these are all pieces of information that's a lot more fixed to your identity. You'll want to consider stronger precautions, such as notifying your financial institution and getting replacement cards. You can also sign up for identity theft protection as well as credit monitoring, and those are provided through our two credit bureaus in Canada, which are Equifax and TransUnion. So if you signed up for credit monitoring, what that service would give you is that if someone opens a loan in your account, you'll actually get a notification of that. Identity theft protection is a service that if you sign up for, it would basically create these extra layers of security in the event someone does want to open a loan in your account. They, or let's say you, would need to prove your identity to a higher degree than you usually would. So they are good services to consider. However, there are some drawbacks. Specifically, one is that, let's say, your information is involved in a breach and somebody has that and then wants to go to a bank and open an account in your name. That bank will only use one out of the two credit bureaus to do the credit check. So let's say you signed up for credit monitoring through Equifax, but this bank that this fraudster went to is only using TransUnion to do their credit checks. You will not receive notification of that loan or that account being opened up until way later down the road when the damage may have already been done. Another drawback, specifically with the identity theft protection, is that, as I mentioned earlier, it creates extra steps that you need to take to prove your identity. So in the event someone who is not you tries to open a loan, that's going to give you that extra protection. However, when it's actually you going to a bank and trying to get a loan, you'll have to also undergo all these extra steps. So just be mindful that, again, there's pros and cons to all of these options. Depending on the type of information involved in a breach, you can also notify certain authorities. So Manusha mentioned, I believe it was Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. So that website is through the Government of Canada, and it's an awesome resource to go to if you're ever a victim of identity theft or if you're involved in breached information. It will tell you who to notify and what authority, depending on, again, the type of information. The last thing I wanted to note is something called the sleeper effect. So oftentimes what we see is that when someone has their information breached, so it could be in the hands of the wrong person, they will be super vigilant in looking at their bank statements, consider, signing up for these services that we mentioned, and just being really proactive. And then a year will go by and nothing happened to their information, no identity theft. So they start getting this thought that, hey, nothing's going to happen now because nothing did happen after this breach. And that's kind of, again, the sleeper effect, because these breaches, despite your information being given away, you can actually experience effects 5 or 10 years down the road. Because once it's out there, you unfortunately don't know what's going on with it or who else it could go to. So it's really important to continue to be vigilant, not only, let's say, after a breach, but just as your everyday life, to focus on privacy and horning in on your identity, especially in this new digital world.
Exactly. It's super important to just stay and be vigilant. Just some general tips that you can consider is to check your credit report at least once a year from TransUnion or Equifax. As we've already mentioned, always create a strong password and use different ones for each of your account. Another big thing in this day and age is don't overshare on social media. So limit information that is publicly available through your social media and don't use that information if it is publicly available. So, for example, if I was born in Durham and I put that out there on my social media, I shouldn't be using that same information as a security answer for one of my accounts. So, another part of that is just knowing the information that your kids, friends, and other people have and post about you. Especially for parents out there, just some general tips are to use parental controls. Make sure that you can see your kid's screen. And a very, very big one that applies to everyone is lead by example. The more you work at protecting your privacy and set an example, the more others will follow as well.
Thanks, Manisha. And now you talked about social media, which is one of those things that's riddled with oversharing. So are there ways to navigate social media safely, whether it's through Zoom calls, updating Instagram or Facebook feeds, posting to TikTok? How do we keep the privacy of our children, ourselves, and the older adults in our lives secure?
Again, I think this is a really important question, especially as a result of the pandemic, because we are using more social media platforms to communicate with our loved ones. And it's important to remember that social media sites or apps are definitely not immune to these attacks or scams that we've been mentioning throughout this webinar. So ways that you can maintain your privacy on social media, as Manusha said, just be mindful of what you post. Once it's out there, even if you have pretty strict security settings, you do not really know 100% where that photo or where that information may lead to. So just again, be reflective of what you're posting out there and try not post personal information, let's say like your address or phone number or work details. Also, I want to caution on posting informative pictures. So as an example, let's say you're taking a photo outside of your house and your street address or house number could show, right? So those kind of inadvertently got captured in the photo, but again, if they're in the wrong hands, someone can now know what your address is. And I think oftentimes we do this, we're not totally mindful of what may be lingering in the background of a photo before we post it. So that's just another good idea to reflect on when you're using social media. On a similar note, you also wouldn't want to post, let's say, details about being on vacation while you're actually on vacation. And the reason why we suggest this is because you're almost letting people know that your house may be vacant. And as a result, unfortunately, let's say someone could break in and then risk more privacy and security harms to you by stealing your devices that may be lying around your home. So it's always a good idea to post about those vacation details when you're actually back at home. A few other things I wanted to note when it comes to maintaining your privacy on social media is to avoid clickbait. So oftentimes we will see these little articles or stories pop up all throughout social media, enticing us to click it. An example is, check what celebrity shares your birthday. And when you press that, you oftentimes need to give your personal information, like your birth date. And what will usually happen is that these are like random baits in which these potential hackers, let's say, are just trying to obtain information from you to then misuse. So they try and dress it up to be pretty, but just be really reflective again on what information you give out there. And on the same token, what we're seeing often with social media nowadays is that these cyber criminals will actually create completely fake profile accounts and add you as a friend or a connection, and then send you private messages. And these accounts will look very legitimate. They have photos on there as well as multiple connections. So it could appear to be a normal person, but when they're kind of urging you to do something or download or click and provide information, those are oftentimes phishing attacks. And that's what Manusha kind of touched on earlier. So just be mindful that those do exist and they can come your way. So always think before you click on something.
Exactly. And also just adjust your privacy settings. For every social media platform that you're using, always check what the default privacy settings are on their website. Most default privacy settings on social media allow for your information to be shared with third-party online users. So just be aware what those are and what you're comfortable with. Another thing that happens is if you have your location setting turned on your phone, Facebook might tap into that and share that information as well. So just be mindful of what these privacy settings are and what you're comfortable with. Another thing is that with most social media platforms, a lot of these accounts are free. So it's important to note that with all of these social media platforms, nothing is really free. Even though they may have ad revenue, for most of the time, they also do share your information. So another thing is don't connect your social media with all your accounts. Don't have your Facebook connected to your Instagram. It may be super convenient to log into various online accounts and platforms using your social media account, but it's just a lot easier in the long run to not have them all synced and connected. Another thing is if you're using your phone, make sure that you delete any unnecessary or unused apps. So just get rid of them. If they're on your phone and you don't use them, um, they're most likely sitting there and just collecting your information. So just get rid of them. And then my final point is that with everything that we're talking about today, nothing is guaranteed. There is no 100% security and there is no 100% protection. We're just here to help you and provide you with suggestions to help protect yourself. But the ball's in your court. Help yourself navigate your own privacy.
Great points. And I think there is a risk in everything we do. I think the key behind it all is being adequately informed with the right information. Is there something that you can do as a parent to educate your children on what information should be kept private? Is there something you can advise the older adult in your life about being cautious with unexpected emails and phone calls? Arming ourselves with knowledge so that we can make the right choices means protection for ourselves, our family, our friends, our employers, and colleagues. As important as locking doors at night or setting the alarm, keeping valuables locked away, our privacy deserves the same detail of attention and effort. And this brings us to the conclusion of our session today. I want to thank Mallory and the Whitby Library for inviting us to share our tips with you today. I want to thank our privacy analysts, Manisha and Robin, for being our panelists and answering the tough questions on privacy. I encourage you to reach out to our Access and Privacy Office at the Region of Durham with any additional questions. Thank you again for tuning in, and we hope that you learned something new and continue to practice good cyber and privacy hygiene in everything you do.